When a waiter at their favorite restaurant said, "Welcome back, Ms. Rodriguez. Your usual table?" my parents discovered I owned the entire chain they'd been bragging about eating at for years. Here's how a trust fund kid they called a disappointment became a multi-millionaire without them ever knowing. I'm Captain Elena Rodriguez, and this story starts with a phone call that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. It was 0600 hours on a Tuesday morning at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The air was crisp with that pre-dawn bite that made your breath visible in small puffs as you walked across the base. I was sitting on the edge of my narrow military-issued bunk, lacing up my combat boots for morning PT when my phone buzzed against the metal nightstand. The sound echoed in the sparse barracks room I'd called home for the past 3 years. Unknown number from a 704 area code, Charlotte, my hometown. Something in my gut told me to answer, even though I'd trained myself to ignore calls from that area code. Too many painful conversations with family members who thought they knew what was best for my life. Elena? The voice was shaky, unfamiliar, like someone who'd been debating this call for hours. This is Marcus Chen, your family's accountant. I need to tell you something your parents don't know I'm calling. My blood went cold. Marcus had handled the Rodriguez family finances for 20 years. He was the quiet, methodical man who sat in the corner during family gatherings, always with his leather briefcase, always polite but distant. He wore the same navy suit to every holiday dinner, spoke only when spoken to, and had never once initiated a conversation with me. He'd certainly never called me directly. Not once. "Marcus." I set down my boot and gripped the phone tighter. "What's wrong? Is someone hurt?" No, everyone's fine. Well, physically fine. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What do you know about your trust fund?" The trust fund. The mythical college fund my parents had dangled over my head for years like a carrot, then snatched away when I chose the military over their predetermined path for my life. "I know my parents froze it when I enlisted," I said, my voice flat. "They said it was punishment for choosing a quote, dead-end military career over the family business legacy. They made it pretty clear that money was gone forever." Quote. Marcus's laugh was bitter, almost hollow. "Elena, your parents never had the authority to freeze that trust. And it was never just a college fund." I stood up, suddenly restless. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete walls. "What do you mean?" "The restaurant chain your grandfather invested in when you were born, Coastal Kitchens? Elena, you don't just have shares in it. According to the legal documents I'm looking at right now, documents that were sealed until your 25th birthday." His voice cracked. "You own 78% of it." I dropped the phone. It clattered against the concrete floor, Marcus's voice becoming a tiny echo as I stared at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just heard. Coastal Kitchens. I knew that name. I'd seen the Forbes articles about their expansion, their IPO plans, their projected billion-dollar valuation. The upscale casual dining chain that had exploded across the Southeast over the past decade. Sleek locations with exposed brick walls, craft cocktails, and farm-to-table menus that charged $30 for a steak. My parents ate there every Sunday after church. They posted Instagram photos of their Sunday family tradition. Always the same table by the window. Always the same proud smiles as they held up their wine glasses. They bragged to their country club friends about their favorite upscale dining experience, and how they, quote, appreciated fine dining establishments that understood quality. The same parents who'd cut me off financially 3 years ago for choosing what they called a dead-end military career over the family business legacy. The same parents who told everyone at the Charlotte Country Club that I was throwing my life away playing soldier instead of taking my rightful place in society. I scrambled to pick up the phone, my hands shaking. Marcus, are you still there?" "I'm here, Elena. I'm sorry. I know this is a lot." How is this possible?" My parents said grandfather left me a small college fund. They said it was maybe $50,000, and they froze it when I enlisted because I was making poor life choices. There was a long pause. I could hear Marcus shuffling papers, the sound of him opening file folders. Elena, your parents never read the full trust documents. They saw a, quote, educational fund and assumed it was just tuition money. But your grandfather was very specific. The trust was designed to mature when you turned 25, and it was never just about education. I started pacing my tiny room, the phone pressed to my ear. 8 feet by 10 feet of government-issued furniture and bare walls. I'd gotten used to the cramped space, found comfort in its simplicity. But suddenly, it felt like a cage. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Your grandfather, Eduardo Rodriguez, was a brilliant businessman. When you were born, he didn't just want to give you money. He wanted to give you independence. He knew your parents would try to control you with finances, so he created something they couldn't touch. I stopped pacing. What do you mean? He bought into Coastal Kitchens when it was just 3 locations in 1999. The founder, Thomas Mitchell, was looking for investors to expand beyond the Charlotte market. Your grandfather spent $2 million of his own money for a 78% stake. But here's the thing. He didn't put it in his name. He put it in yours, through an irrevocable trust. Your parents thought it was just another investment in his portfolio. My mind was racing. So when Coastal Kitchens started expanding, your stake expanded with it. Every new location, every franchise deal, every profit, all of it belongs to you. Your parents have been eating at restaurants you own for years, posting about it on social media, bragging about their sophisticated taste to their friends. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt slightly. How much? How much are we talking about? The last valuation I saw was $47 million. And that was 6 months ago. With their current expansion plans into Florida and Tennessee, you're looking at potentially $60 minus $70 million by year's end. I sat back down on my bunk, hard. The mattress creaked under my weight. My military salary was $54,000 a year. I'd been carefully budgeting every dollar, eating at the chow hall to save money, driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic that barely passed inspection. I'd been proud of my financial discipline, proud of living within my means. And all this time, I'd been a multi-millionaire. Marcus, why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you tell me before? His voice got quieter, more careful. Because the trust had specific instructions. You couldn't know until you turned 25. And Elena, you turned 25 last month. Last month. My 25th birthday had come and gone with no fanfare. I'd worked a double shift, grabbed a burger from the base McDonald's, and called it a night. My parents hadn't called. They hadn't sent a card. They hadn't acknowledged it at all. I hadn't expected them to. We'd been estranged for 3 years, ever since the night I'd told them I was enlisting instead of joining my father's real estate empire. There's more, Marcus continued. Your grandfather included a clause. If your parents ever cut you off financially or disowned you, the trust would automatically trigger early. Elena, when they told you 3 years ago that you were no longer part of the Rodriguez family legacy, legally speaking, you became the sole owner immediately. My breath caught. I've been the owner for 3 years, and nobody told me? The trust was very specific about discretion. I was instructed to maintain normal operations until you turned 25, then contact you directly. Your parents still don't know. They think Coastal Kitchens is just some restaurant chain they enjoy. I stood up again, this time with purpose. Marcus, I need to see these documents, all of them. I'm already preparing everything. Elena, there's something else. As the majority owner, you have the right to make executive decisions. The current management team has been running things well, but they report to you. You could walk into any Coastal Kitchens location right now and introduce yourself as the owner. The owner? I was the owner of the restaurant chain my parents bragged about to their friends. The same parents who'd told me I'd never amount to anything. The same parents who'd said I was wasting my potential by serving my country. Marcus, my parents, they eat there every Sunday? Same table every week. Table 12 by the window. They have a standing reservation under Rodriguez Party of 4. They always bring your Aunt Carmen and her husband. The staff knows them well. They tip well, they're polite, and they always order the same thing. Your father gets the ribeye, medium rare. Your mother gets the salmon with extra vegetables. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, but a cold, calculating clarity I'd learned in the military. When you're given unexpected intelligence, you don't react emotionally. You assess the situation, analyze the data, and plan your next move. I need to see the financials. All of them. And I need to understand my legal rights as owner. I'll courier everything to you today. Elena, there's one more thing. Your parents have been telling people they're, quote, investors in various restaurant ventures. They've been implying to their social circle that they have connections to Coastal Kitchens. They've never directly lied, but they've certainly let people believe they have more influence than they do. Of course they had. That was classic Rodriguez family behavior. Take credit for success, distance yourself from failure. I'd watched my parents do it my entire life. You mean they've been taking credit for my success? In a roundabout way, yes. And Elena, there's something else you should know. Last month, your father approached me about liquidating some of your grandfather's, quote, smaller investments to fund your brother Miguel's new tech startup. He wanted to cash out what he thought was your educational fund. My jaw clenched. Miguel, my younger brother, the golden child who'd never worked a day in his life. The one who got a BMW for his 18th birthday, while I got a lecture about earning my keep. The one who dropped out of 3 different colleges and was now on his 4th revolutionary business idea. What did you tell him? I told him those assets were no longer available. He got angry, said something about that money being wasted on Elena's military fantasies anyway. He doesn't know what he was really asking for. So my parents thought they could just liquidate my inheritance to fund Miguel's latest get-rich-quick scheme. They assumed I'd never be successful enough to claim it, so they decided to redistribute it among family members they considered more, quote, deserving. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. I need you to arrange a meeting with the executive team at Coastal Kitchens. I want to understand the business from the ground up. Of course. Elena, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I walked to my small mirror and looked at myself. Captain Elena Rodriguez, U.S. Army. 3 years of my parents telling me I was a disappointment. 3 years of them cutting me off, dismissing my career, treating me like a failure. 3 years of eating at restaurants I owned while bragging about their sophisticated dining experiences. I'm going to do exactly what my grandfather would have wanted, I said to Marcus. I'm going to take control of what's mine. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my barracks room, trying to process everything. The early morning light was starting to filter through the small window, casting long shadows across the floor. In a few minutes, I'd need to head to PT. Life would go on as normal, at least on the surface. But everything had changed. I thought about my grandfather, Eduardo Rodriguez. He died when I was 12, but I remembered him clearly. He was nothing like my parents. Where they were concerned with appearances and social status, he was practical and wise. He'd worked his way up from nothing, built a successful construction company, and never forgot where he came from. He used to tell me stories about growing up poor in Mexico, about crossing the border with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. He'd pull me aside at family gatherings and say, Elena, never let anyone make you feel small. You have the heart of a warrior. I'd always thought he was just being a supportive grandfather. I never imagined he was also being prophetic. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Documents being couriered today. Meeting with Coastal Kitchens executives scheduled for Friday. You're going to need to take leave. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'll be there. As I finished getting ready for PT, I thought about the irony of it all. My parents had cut me off to teach me a lesson about responsibility and real-world consequences. They'd wanted me to crawl back to them, apologize for my mistake, and take my predetermined place in their world. Instead, they'd unknowingly activated a clause that made me wealthier than they'd ever be. I grabbed my PT gear and headed for the door, but stopped at the threshold. The base was coming to life around me. Soldiers heading to morning formation, the distant sound of reveille, the ordered chaos of military life that had become my world. But first I had one more call to make. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for Coastal Kitchen's Charlotte location, the one where my parents ate every Sunday. Coastal Kitchens, this is Jennifer. How can I help you? Hi, Jennifer. I need to make a reservation for this Sunday. Table 12 by the window if it's available. Oh, I'm sorry, but that table is reserved every Sunday for the Rodriguez family. They've been coming here for years. I could put you on a waiting list in case they cancel, but they never do. I smiled for the first time since Marcus's call. Actually, I am a Rodriguez. Elena Rodriguez, I'll be joining them. There was a pause. Oh, I didn't realize there was another family member. Of course, I'll make sure there's space for you. Will that be 5 people then? Actually, just make it for 1. I'll be dining alone. Just 1? But the Rodriguez family always. Trust me, I said, my voice steady. This Sunday is going to be different. After I hung up, I stood in my doorway for a moment, looking out at the base coming to life in the early morning light. The familiar sounds of military life continued around me, but I felt like I was seeing it all through new eyes. In a few days, I'd be walking into a restaurant I owned, watching my parents enjoy their Sunday tradition at a table they'd reserved in a building that belonged to me. They'd have no idea that their disappointment daughter was about to become their biggest revelation. My grandfather had been right. I did have the heart of a warrior. And it was time to fight for what was mine. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to see my empire with my own eyes, meet the people who'd been running it in my absence, and learn everything I could about the business that had been generating millions in my name. The thought of walking into that first Coastal Kitchens location and announcing myself as the owner both thrilled and terrified me. But I'd been trained to handle pressure, to make decisions under stress, to lead when leadership was needed. This was just another mission. Except this time, instead of serving my country, I was serving justice. And my family had no idea what was coming. The courier arrived at exactly 1400 hours the next day, just as I was finishing my lunch at the chow hall. A young woman in a FedEx uniform found me at my usual table in the corner, away from the noise and chaos of my fellow soldiers discussing weekend plans and upcoming deployments. Captain Rodriguez? She asked, holding a thick manila envelope that looked like it weighed several pounds. I nodded and signed for it, my hands trembling slightly as I took possession of what I knew would be life-changing documents. The envelope was sealed with red wax, old school, the kind of formality my grandfather had always insisted upon for important business matters. Back in my barracks room, I spread the contents across my small desk. The papers seemed to multiply as I pulled them out. Trust documents, corporate filings, financial statements, stock certificates, and a handwritten letter in my grandfather's distinctive script. I picked up the letter first. It was dated 3 months before his death, when I was 12 years old. My dearest Elena, it began, if you are reading this, then you have reached your 25th birthday, and it is time for you to know the truth about your inheritance and your future. I sat back in my chair, the letter heavy in my hands. My grandfather's voice seemed to echo from the page, that distinctive accent that had softened over the years but never fully disappeared. Your parents believe they control your destiny through money. They have always seen you as an investment that should pay dividends in the form of obedience and conformity. But I have watched you, Misha, and I know you have the spirit of a fighter. You will not be controlled. I could almost hear him saying the words, see him sitting in his study with his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, carefully crafting each sentence. I have created something for you that they cannot touch, cannot control, and cannot take away. By the time you read this, you will own a significant portion of what I believe will become a very successful restaurant chain. But more than that, you will own your independence. The letter went on to explain the legal structure he'd created, the safeguards he'd put in place, and his hopes for my future. But it was the final paragraph that made me understand the full scope of what he'd done. Your parents will try to make you believe that you are nothing without them, that you need their approval and their money to succeed. This gift proves that you never did. You are a Rodriguez, Elena, and we build our own empires. I set the letter down and picked up the financial statements. The numbers were staggering. Coastal Kitchens had grown from 3 locations to 127 in just over 2 decades. The profit margins were healthy, the expansion plans aggressive, and the projected growth astronomical. But it was the employee handbook that really caught my attention. I flipped through page after page of policies, procedures, and corporate culture guidelines. This wasn't just a business. It was a well-oiled machine that had been running successfully for years. The executive team profiles were impressive. CEO Sarah Mitchell, daughter of the founder, had an MBA from Wharton and 15 years of restaurant industry experience. CFO David Park had previously worked for several Fortune 500 companies. Head of Operations Maria Santos had started as a server and worked her way up over 12 years. These weren't just employees. They were professionals who had built something significant. And they'd been doing it on my behalf, generating millions in profits that had been accumulating in accounts I didn't even know existed. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the online banking portal Marcus had set up for me. The balance made me dizzy. $23,847,392.18. Just sitting there, earning interest, waiting for me to claim it. $23 million, more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. More money than my parents had ever had access to. More money than they'd ever imagined I could possess. I thought about my childhood, about the constant lectures about money and responsibility. My parents had always used financial leverage to control my decisions. We're paying for your education, so you'll major in business. We're buying your car, so you'll drive what we choose. We're funding your lifestyle, so you'll follow our rules. When I'd announced my intention to enlist, they'd been furious. Not because they were worried about my safety. They were angry because I was choosing a path they couldn't control with their money. You're throwing away every opportunity we've given you, my father had said during our final argument. You're spitting in the face of everything we've built for you. My mother had been even more direct. If you choose this military fantasy over your family obligations, don't expect us to support you. You'll be on your own, and you'll discover very quickly how difficult life can be without our help. They'd been so confident that I would fail, so certain that I would come crawling back to them within a few months, desperate for their financial support and willing to accept their conditions. Instead, I'd thrived. I'd found purpose and meaning in military service. I'd discovered that I was capable of far more than they'd ever imagined. I'd built a life based on my own values, not their expectations. And all the while, I'd been accumulating wealth that dwarfed anything they'd ever possessed. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Marcus Chen's number. Elena, I hope you've had a chance to review the documents. I'm still processing everything, I admitted. Marcus, help me understand something. How did my parents never figure this out? How did they not realize that their, quote, small college fund was actually a multi-million-dollar business ownership? Marcus chuckled. Your grandfather was very clever about that. He structured the trust so that all the documentation went directly to my firm. Your parents received annual statements showing a modest educational fund that grew slowly and steadily. They never saw the corporate filings, the profit statements, or the expansion reports. But they must have known about Coastal Kitchens. They eat there every week. They knew about it as customers, not as stakeholders. Your grandfather made sure the restaurant chain appeared to be just another one of his investments. He had several, and your parents never paid attention to the details. They just assumed everything would eventually be divided among the family according to his will. I was beginning to understand the full scope of my grandfather's strategy. He'd essentially created a parallel financial universe that existed completely outside my parents' knowledge or control. Marcus, I want to meet with the executive team tomorrow. Can you arrange that? Already scheduled. Sarah Mitchell is flying in from Atlanta to meet with you at our offices at 10 a.m. She's bringing the quarterly reports and the 5-year expansion plan. Does she know who I am? She knows you're the beneficial owner of the trust that holds the majority stake. She's been preparing for this meeting for years, actually. Part of the trust agreement specified that she would eventually report directly to you. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Tomorrow, I would walk into a room as the owner of a major restaurant chain. I would make decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was walking into. I spent the rest of the evening reading through corporate reports, financial statements, and market analyses. Coastal Kitchens wasn't just successful, it was positioned to become one of the dominant players in the casual dining market. The expansion plan was particularly impressive. They were targeting mid-sized cities throughout the South and Southeast, focusing on locations with strong demographics and limited competition. Each new restaurant generated an average of $2.8 million in annual revenue, with profit margins of 12 to 15%. At that rate, my stake in the company would be worth over $100 million within 5 years. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd learned. 2 days ago, I'd been a junior Army officer living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was the owner of a restaurant empire that my parents had been unknowingly supporting with their weekly visits. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Elena, this is Sarah Mitchell. I'm looking forward to meeting you tomorrow. Your grandfather spoke about you often, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what we've built together." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you. I'm looking forward to learning about the business." As I got ready for bed, I thought about Sunday's dinner at Coastal Kitchens. My parents would be sitting at their usual table, ordering their usual meals, completely unaware that their disappointment daughter owned the building they were dining in. But I wouldn't be the same person who had left Charlotte 3 years ago. I wouldn't be the daughter who had been intimidated by their threats and disappointed by their rejection. I would be Captain Elena Rodriguez, United States Army, and the owner of a multi-million-dollar restaurant empire. It was time to show them exactly what their military fantasy had made possible. I fell asleep that night with my grandfather's letter on my nightstand, his words echoing in my mind. "You are a Rodriguez, Elena, and we build our own empires." Tomorrow, I would begin learning how to run mine. The next morning, I requested a day of leave and drove to Charlotte. The 2-hour drive gave me time to think about what I wanted to accomplish in the meeting with Sarah Mitchell and how I wanted to position myself as the new owner. I'd worn my dress uniform, partly because it was the most professional outfit I owned, but mostly because I wanted to make a statement. I was proud of my military service, and I wanted the executive team to understand that I brought discipline, strategic thinking, and leadership experience to my role as owner. Marcus's office was in a sleek high-rise building in downtown Charlotte, the kind of place that screamed success and sophistication. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to a different world, one where million-dollar decisions were made over coffee and handshakes. Sarah Mitchell was waiting in the conference room when I arrived. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with short auburn hair and intelligent green eyes. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Elena, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you," she said. "Your grandfather talked about you constantly. He was so proud of your military service." "Thank you. I'm eager to learn about the business." For the next 3 hours, Sarah walked me through everything: the corporate structure, the expansion strategy, the financial performance, the competitive landscape. She answered every question, with detailed data and clear explanations. But it was her passion for the business that really impressed me. This wasn't just a job for her, it was a calling. She genuinely cared about the employees, the customers, and the communities where Coastal Kitchens operated. "Your grandfather gave me a lot of autonomy," she explained. "But he also made it clear that everything we built was ultimately for you. He wanted you to inherit not just a business, but a legacy." "What did he tell you about me?" Sarah smiled. "He said you were the strongest person he'd ever met, but that you didn't know it yet. He said you would face challenges that would test your character, but that you would emerge stronger. He believed you would be ready for this responsibility when the time came." I felt a lump in my throat. My grandfather had known, somehow, that my parents would try to control me with money. He'd seen the conflict coming and had prepared for it. "Sarah, I want you to know that I don't plan to make any immediate changes," I said. "You've built something extraordinary here, and I want to learn from you before I start making decisions." Her relief was visible. "I was hoping you'd say that. Your grandfather chose you as his successor, but he also chose me to help you succeed. I think we can build something even bigger together." We talked about the expansion plans, the new markets they were targeting, and the potential for franchising. By the end of the meeting, I had a clear picture of not just what I owned, but what it could become. "Elena, there's something else," Sarah said as we were wrapping up. "Your grandfather left specific instructions about your parents. He knew they would try to take credit for your success, and he wanted to make sure you were prepared for that." I leaned forward. "What kind of instructions?" "He wanted you to know that everything you've inherited was earned through your own character and choices. Your parents had nothing to do with it. In fact, their attempt to control you through money was exactly what triggered the early release of your trust." Sarah pulled out a final document, one I hadn't seen in the previous day's package. It was a letter from my grandfather to my parents, dated the same day as my letter, but with instructions that it'd only be delivered if they attempted to claim credit for my success. This is yours to use if and when you think it's appropriate, she said, but he wanted you to have it. I read the letter quickly. It was polite but firm, explaining that my inheritance was specifically designed to be independent of their influence or control. It made it clear that their attempt to teach me a lesson by cutting me off had actually accelerated my financial independence. The final paragraph was particularly pointed. Elena's success is her own. She has earned everything she has received through her character, her choices, and her courage. If you attempt to take credit for her achievements, you will only demonstrate how little you understood about the daughter you raised. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my jacket pocket. I hoped I would never need to use it, but it was good to know it existed. Sarah, I have one more question. My parents eat at the Charlotte location every Sunday. They have a standing reservation. Do you think it would be possible for me to observe them without being noticed? Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. I think that can be arranged. In fact, I think it's exactly what your grandfather would have wanted you to do. As I drove back to Fort Bragg that evening, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I understood now why my grandfather had been so secretive about my inheritance. He hadn't just given me money, he'd given me the power to define my own success on my own terms. My parents had spent 3 years believing they had taught me a lesson about the consequences of defying their wishes. They had no idea that their rejection had actually triggered the very independence they'd been trying to prevent. Sunday was 3 days away, 3 days to prepare for a confrontation that had been building for 3 years. I was ready. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through scenarios and conversations that might unfold the next day. But I had one more task to complete before Sunday's confrontation. I needed to see my restaurant through the eyes of an owner, not just a daughter seeking revenge. I drove to the Charlotte location of Coastal Kitchens at 10 a.m., during the quiet lull between breakfast and lunch service. The building was more impressive than I'd remembered from my teenage years when I'd driven past it countless times. 2 stories of warm brick and large windows, with carefully landscaped grounds that spoke of success and permanence. Sarah Mitchell was waiting for me in the parking lot dressed casually in jeans and a Coastal Kitchens polo shirt. She looked nervous, but excited, like a student about to present her thesis to a professor she desperately wanted to impress. Elena, thank you for coming early, she said, extending her hand. I thought it would be better for you to see the operation before we deal with tomorrow's situation. I shook her hand, noting the calluses that suggested she still worked alongside her employees rather than just managing from an office. I appreciate that. I want to understand what I'm walking into. Before we go in, there's something you should know. The staff has been told that you're a potential investor doing due diligence. They don't know you're the owner, and they certainly don't know about your family situation. I thought it would be better to keep things simple for now. Smart. I nodded my approval and followed her toward the entrance. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. The design was sophisticated but welcoming. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and warm lighting that made the space feel both modern and timeless. The bar area featured an impressive selection of craft beers and wines, while the dining room offered a mix of booth seating and tables that could accommodate everything from intimate dinners to large family gatherings. But it was the energy of the place that really struck me. Even during the slow period, the staff moved with purpose and efficiency. Servers were restocking supplies, the kitchen staff was prepping for lunch service, and the manager was reviewing reservation lists with the hostess. The lunch crowd starts arriving around 11:30, Sarah explained as we walked through the dining room. But our real busy period is dinner service, especially on weekends. We typically serve 400 to 500 customers on a Friday or Saturday night. She led me to a table in the corner where we could observe the operation without being in the way. Within moments, a server approached with coffee and a warm smile. Good morning, Ms. Mitchell. The usual? Just coffee today, thanks. This is Elena. She's visiting from out of town. The server, a young woman with bright eyes and genuine enthusiasm, immediately turned her attention to me. Welcome to Coastal Kitchens. Is this your first time with us? Yes, but I've heard wonderful things. You'll love it here. We pride ourselves on fresh ingredients and great service. Can I get you anything to start? After she left, Sarah leaned forward. That's Jessica. She's been with us for 2 years, working her way through college. She's planning to transfer to the management training program next year. You promote from within? Whenever possible. Your grandfather insisted on that. He believed that people who understood the business from the ground up made the best leaders. Over the next hour, Sarah introduced me to key staff members and explained the operational philosophy that had made Coastal Kitchens successful. It wasn't just about the food, though that was excellent. It was about creating an experience that made customers want to return. We get a lot of regulars, Sarah explained. People who come in every week, sometimes multiple times a week. They know the staff, they have favorite tables, they've become part of our extended family. Like my parents, I thought. They'd been coming here every Sunday for years, building relationships with the staff, establishing routines and preferences. They'd probably never imagined that their weekly tradition was directly enriching their estranged daughter. Sarah, tell me about tomorrow. What do you know about my parents' routine? She pulled out a small notebook and flipped through several pages. They arrive every Sunday at 12:30 p.m., right after church. Always table 12 by the window. They specifically requested it years ago, and we've held it for them ever since. They typically order the same appetizer, the spinach and artichoke dip, and they always get a bottle of the house Chardonnay. She paused, consulting her notes. Your father orders the ribeye, medium rare, with garlic mashed potatoes and asparagus. Your mother gets the cedar plank salmon with rice pilaf and steamed vegetables. They usually stay for about an hour and a half, and they always tip exactly 20%. The level of detail was both impressive and slightly unsettling. But I suppose that was what made the restaurant successful. They paid attention to their customers' preferences and made them feel special. Who usually serves them? That would be Marcus, not your Marcus, a different Marcus, Marcus Rivera. He's been their server for about 18 months, ever since he transferred from our Asheville location. He's very professional, knows their preferences, and they seem to like him. Does he know about my situation? Sarah shook her head. As far as the staff is concerned, you're just another customer. We thought it would be better to keep things simple, at least initially. I spent the rest of the morning learning about the business operations, the staff structure, and the customer base. By the time I left, I felt like I had a genuine understanding of what I owned, not just the financial assets, but the people and the community that had been built around the restaurant. But more importantly, I felt a sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about confronting my parents or proving a point. This was about hundreds of employees who depended on the business for their livelihood, and thousands of customers who had made Coastal Kitchens part of their lives. Whatever happened tomorrow, I couldn't let my personal drama damage what my grandfather and Sarah had built. That evening, I called Marcus Chen to go over the final details of tomorrow's plan. Elena, I've been thinking about this all day, he said. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you reveal yourself as the owner, there's no going back. Your relationship with your parents will be forever changed. Marcus, my relationship with my parents was forever changed 3 years ago when they cut me off. Tomorrow is just about making that reality clear to everyone involved. Fair enough, but I want you to be prepared for their reaction. They're going to be angry, probably embarrassed, and definitely shocked. People don't always respond rationally in situations like this. Quote, I'd been thinking about that all day. My parents were proud people who valued their reputation and social standing above almost everything else. Having their estranged daughter reveal herself as the owner of their favorite restaurant in front of the staff and other customers would be humiliating for them. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Marcus, I need you to be there tomorrow, not as their accountant, but as my representative. I want them to understand that this isn't some teenage rebellion. This is a business decision made by a successful adult. Of course, I'll be there by noon. One more thing. I want you to bring the letter my grandfather wrote to them. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Sunday morning, I woke up before dawn and went for a long run around the base. The physical exertion helped clear my mind and focus my thoughts on what I wanted to accomplish. This wasn't about revenge, I reminded myself. It was about truth. My parents had spent 3 years telling anyone who would listen that their daughter had thrown her life away on a military fantasy. They'd implied that I was struggling financially and socially, that I'd made a terrible mistake by choosing the army over their predetermined path for my life. Today, they would learn the truth. I chose my outfit carefully, not my dress uniform, which might seem too formal, but a well-tailored civilian suit that conveyed success and professionalism. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a successful business owner who had built something meaningful with her life. The drive to Charlotte felt different this time. Instead of the nervous energy I'd felt all week, I experienced a strange sense of calm. I was ready for this confrontation, had prepared for it thoroughly, and was confident in my position. I arrived at Coastal Kitchens at 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes before I knew my parents would appear. Sarah was waiting for me in the parking lot, looking nervous but determined. "Elena, the staff is expecting you for your, quote, business meeting. Marcus Rivera knows to seat you at table 8, which has a clear view of table 12. He'll be serving your parents as usual." "And Marcus Chen?" "He's already inside, at table 15 near the bar. He has all the documents you requested." I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. Let's do this. The restaurant was busier than it had been yesterday, with the Sunday lunch crowd beginning to arrive. Families with children, couples out for a leisurely meal, groups of friends catching up over drinks. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, exactly what you'd want from a neighborhood restaurant. Marcus Rivera seated me at table 8 with a professional smile. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and an easy manner that suggested he was good at his job. "Ms. Rodriguez, welcome back. Ms. Mitchell said you'd be joining us for lunch today." "Thank you. I'm looking forward to observing your Sunday service." "It's our busiest day of the week, but also our most fun. We get a lot of regulars on Sundays, people who've been coming here for years. There's a real sense of community." He handed me a menu and took my drink order, then disappeared to attend to other customers. I used the time to study the layout of the restaurant and observe the staff in action. At exactly 12:30 p.m., my parents arrived. I saw them through the large front windows before they entered the restaurant. My father, Ricardo Rodriguez, was wearing his typical Sunday outfit, a navy blazer over khakis, with a light blue dress shirt and no tie. He looked distinguished, the kind of man who commanded respect in business and social settings. My mother, Carmen Rodriguez, was elegantly dressed in a cream-colored dress and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. They looked successful, happy, and completely unaware that their lives were about to change dramatically. The hostess greeted them warmly. Clearly, they were valued customers and led them to their usual table. I watched as they settled into their routine, my father helping my mother with her chair, both of them acknowledging other diners with polite nods. Marcus Rivera appeared at their table within moments, greeting them like old friends. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, welcome back. Your usual table, your usual time. Some things never change." My father smiled. "Marcus, you know us too well. We'll have the spinach and artichoke dip to start, and a bottle of the house Chardonnay." "Excellent choice. And for your main courses?" "The ribeye, medium rare," my father said. "Cedar plank salmon for me," my mother added. "Perfect. I'll get that started for you right away." I watched this exchange with fascination. These people had been part of my parents' lives for years, had provided them with consistent service and hospitality, and had done so without any idea that they were actually working for their estranged daughter. For the next 20 minutes, I observed my parents in their natural environment. They seemed relaxed and content, discussing what appeared to be church gossip and their plans for the week. They waved to other customers they recognized, chatted briefly with the manager who stopped by their table, and generally behaved like pillars of the community. They looked happy. That was what struck me most. They looked genuinely happy, as if their decision to cut me off 3 years ago had been the right one for their peace of mind. That realization crystallized my resolve. They had moved on with their lives, had found contentment in their decision to reject their daughter, and had probably convinced themselves that they'd been right to do so. It was time to disrupt that contentment. I signaled to Sarah, who was stationed near the kitchen, and she immediately walked over to my table. Elena, are you ready? I nodded and stood up. Let's go introduce me to my customers. We walked across the restaurant toward table 12, Sarah leading the way. As we approached, I could see my parents' confusion as they tried to place Sarah's face. They recognized her as someone important, but couldn't quite remember from where. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah said with a professional smile, I hope you're enjoying your lunch today. Oh yes, wonderful as always, my mother replied. You're the manager, aren't you? Sarah something? Sarah Mitchell, actually. I'm the CEO of Coastal Kitchens. She gestured toward me. I'd like you to meet Elena Rodriguez, the owner of our restaurant chain. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me, their faces cycling through confusion, recognition, and shock in rapid succession. My father was the first to find his voice. Elena? What? What are you doing here? Hello, Dad? Mom? I pulled out a chair and sat down at their table without being invited. I thought it was time we had a conversation about my military fantasy and how it's been working out for me. My mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. I don't understand. You own this restaurant? Not just this restaurant, the entire chain, 127 locations across the Southeast. I gestured around the dining room. Every Sunday for the past 3 years, you've been having dinner in a restaurant that belongs to me. My father's face was turning red. That's impossible. You're in the Army. You don't have the money to own anything like this. You're right, I don't have the money, but I have something better. I have grandfather's trust. The one you thought you could freeze to teach me a lesson about responsibility. I could see other diners beginning to notice the tension at our table, could feel the attention of nearby customers drawn by the obvious family drama unfolding. Elena, we need to discuss this privately, my mother said, her voice tight with controlled panic. I think we've had enough private discussions, I replied. Besides, I thought you'd want to know that your weekly tradition has been directly supporting your daughter's success. Every meal you've eaten here, every tip you've left, every positive review you've posted on social media, all of it has been contributing to my business empire. Marcus Rivera appeared at our table, clearly sensing the tension but professionally trying to maintain normal service. Is everything all right here? Can I get you anything else? Sarah stepped forward. Marcus, I'd like you to meet Elena Rodriguez, the owner of Coastal Kitchens. She's been wanting to meet some of our long-term customers. Marcus's eyes widened as he looked between me and my parents. Oh, I didn't realize. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, I had no idea Elena was your daughter. Neither did we, my father said grimly. The revelation was spreading through the restaurant like wildfire. Other staff members were beginning to gather, word was passing between tables, and I could see cell phones being discreetly pulled out to record what was clearly becoming a very public family confrontation. This was exactly what I'd wanted. A public revelation that would make it impossible for my parents to deny or minimize what had happened. Elena, we need to talk, my mother said, standing up from the table, privately. I think we've said everything we need to say, I replied, remaining seated. But if you have questions about your daughter's success, I'd be happy to answer them. My father leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. You think you're very clever, don't you? Ambushing us like this, making a scene in public. This is exactly the kind of behavior that made us question your judgment 3 years ago. No, Dad. 3 years ago, you questioned my judgment because I chose a path you couldn't control with your money. Today, you're learning that your attempt to control me actually made me more successful than you ever imagined. Sarah had discreetly signaled to Marcus Chen, who was now approaching our table with a folder in his hands. Elena, I believe you wanted me to give this to your parents. I took the folder and placed it on the table in front of my father. This is from grandfather. He wrote it the same day he wrote my letter, with instructions that it should be delivered if you ever tried to take credit for my success. My father opened the folder and began reading, his face growing paler with each sentence. My mother leaned over to read along, her hand covering her mouth as she processed the words. The restaurant around us had grown quieter, with other diners making no pretense of not listening to our conversation. The staff was watching from a respectful distance, clearly fascinated by the drama unfolding at table 12. This can't be legal, my father said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. It's completely legal, Marcus Chen replied. I've been administering the trust for 20 years. Everything was done according to your father's specific instructions. My mother looked up from the letter, tears in her eyes. Elena, we never meant for this to happen. We thought we were teaching you about responsibility, about the importance of family expectations. You taught me about responsibility, I agreed. You taught me that I didn't need your approval or your money to be successful. You taught me that I could build something meaningful on my own terms. I stood up from the table, looking down at my parents, who suddenly seemed smaller and older than I remembered. I want to thank you both, I said, my voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. If you hadn't cut me off 3 years ago, I never would have discovered what I was truly capable of. Your rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me. The silence in the restaurant was complete now, broken only by the sound of my heels on the polished concrete floor as I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear my mother crying and my father's voice, harsh and desperate, calling my name. But I didn't turn around. I had said everything I needed to say. Outside in the parking lot, Sarah was waiting for me with a concerned expression. Elena, are you okay? That was intense. Quote. I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air and smiled. I'm perfect. For the first time in 3 years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As we drove away, I could see my parents through the restaurant window, still sitting at table 12, still processing what had just happened. Their Sunday tradition would never be the same, and neither would mine. The aftermath of Sunday's confrontation unfolded faster than I could have imagined. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and my email inbox was flooded with messages from reporters, business contacts, and people claiming to be long-lost friends. The story had gone viral. Someone in the restaurant had recorded portions of the confrontation on their phone, and the video was now circulating on social media with captions like, "Military daughter owns restaurant chain her parents eat at," and "Trust fund kid reveals she's actually the boss." The comments ranged from supportive to skeptical to downright cruel, but the overall narrative was clear. This was a story about family, money, and the consequences of underestimating someone. I was back at Fort Bragg, trying to maintain some semblance of normal military routine while dealing with the chaos that had erupted in my personal life. My commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, had called me into his office first thing Monday morning. "Captain Rodriguez, I need to understand what's happening here," he said, gesturing to a printout of one of the news articles. "Are you actually the owner of a major restaurant chain?" "Yes, sir. I inherited it through a family trust that matured when I turned 25. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the expression of a man trying to solve a complex puzzle. "And you've been serving as an Army officer while managing a multi-million-dollar business?" "I haven't been managing it, sir. I have an excellent CEO and management team who have been running operations. I only learned about the inheritance last week." "Captain, I need to ask you directly, does this create any conflicts of interest with your military service? Any financial obligations or business relationships that might compromise your judgment or loyalty?" I'd been expecting this question and had already consulted with the base legal office to ensure I understood the regulations. "No, sir. The business is completely separate from my military duties. I'm not involved in any government contracts or defense-related activities." My legal advisor confirmed that there are no conflicts with my continued service. Colonel Martinez nodded slowly. "I have to admit, this is a first for me. I've never had an officer who owned a restaurant empire." He paused, then smiled slightly. "But if you're committed to continuing your service and there are no legal issues, then I see no reason why this should affect your military career." "Thank you, sir. I want to continue serving." "Good. But Rodriguez, I'm going to need you to keep this media attention under control. The Army doesn't need to become part of your family drama." "Understood, sir." As I left his office, I realized that my military service had become even more important to me now. It represented something pure and uncomplicated in my life. A commitment based on duty and honor rather than money or family expectations. Whatever happened with my business empire, I wanted to continue being a soldier. My phone rang as I walked back to my office. Sarah Mitchell's number. "Elena, I hope you're doing okay. Things have been crazy here since yesterday. I'm fine. What's the situation at the restaurant? Well, the good news is that we've had a massive surge in business. Reservations are booked solid for the next 3 weeks, and we've had to add extra staff for dinner service. People are curious about the restaurant that was at the center of the viral story. And the bad news? Your parents. They've been calling the restaurant every few hours since yesterday, demanding to speak with you. They've also been telling people that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that you're just a minority investor, not the actual owner. I felt my jaw clench. Even now, even after being publicly confronted with the truth, they were still trying to control the narrative. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. I want you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to set the record straight, once and for all. Elena, are you sure? Press conferences can be tricky, especially when family is involved. I'm sure, and I want you to invite my parents. They deserve to hear what I have to say. That evening, I spent hours preparing my statement. I wanted to be clear, factual, and professional. This wasn't about attacking my parents. It was about establishing the truth and protecting the business that hundreds of people depended on for their livelihoods. I also called Marcus Chen to discuss the legal implications of going public with more details about the trust and my inheritance. Elena, you have every right to discuss your own financial situation, he said, but I'd recommend keeping the focus on the business rather than the family dynamics. The more professional you appear, the more credibility you'll have. That's exactly what I want to do. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about responsibility. Tuesday afternoon, I drove to Charlotte for the press conference. Sarah had arranged for it to be held at the corporate headquarters, a modest office building that housed the administrative functions of Coastal Kitchens. The conference room was packed with reporters, business journalists, and local media personalities. I spotted my parents in the back row, looking uncomfortable but determined to be present. I wore my dress uniform, both because I wanted to honor my military service and because I knew it would convey authority and credibility. The questions would be about business and family, but I was answering them as Captain Elena Rodriguez, U.S. Army. Sarah introduced me with a brief overview of my background and my role as the owner of Coastal Kitchens. Then she turned the microphone over to me. Good afternoon. I've called this press conference to address the speculation and misinformation that has circulated since Sunday's events at our Charlotte location. I looked out at the crowd of reporters, cameras, and recording devices, then continued. My name is Captain Elena Rodriguez, and I serve as an officer in the United States Army. I am also the majority owner of Coastal Kitchens, a restaurant chain that operates 127 locations across the Southeast. I paused, letting that sink in. I inherited this business through a trust established by my grandfather Eduardo Rodriguez when I was born. The trust was designed to mature when I turned 25, which occurred last month. I learned about my inheritance exactly 1 week ago. A reporter raised her hand. Captain Rodriguez, can you explain why you didn't know about your inheritance until now? My grandfather created the trust with specific instructions that I not be informed of its existence until I reached the age of 25. He believed that young people should have the opportunity to build their own character and make their own choices, without the influence of inherited wealth. Another reporter, what about your parents? Did they know about the trust? I chose my words carefully. My parents were aware that my grandfather had established an educational fund for me, but they did not understand the full scope of the trust or its value. They believed it was a modest college fund. Quote, Captain Rodriguez, there are reports that your parents cut you off financially 3 years ago. Can you comment on that? This was the question I'd been dreading, but I'd prepared for it. 3 years ago, I made the decision to serve my country in the military rather than pursue the career path my parents had envisioned for me. They disagreed with my choice and decided to withdraw their financial support. I respected their decision and have been financially independent since that time. But you were actually wealthy all along? I was unaware of my inheritance. I've been living on my military salary and managing my finances like any other junior officer. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from my military service to my business plans to my family relationships. I answered each one as professionally as possible, sticking to facts and avoiding personal attacks. Finally, a reporter asked the question I'd been waiting for. Captain Rodriguez, what's your message to young people who might be facing similar family pressures about their career choices? I looked directly into the camera and spoke from the heart. My message is this: your worth is not determined by your family's approval or their financial support. You have the right to choose your own path, even if it's difficult, even if it means sacrifice. Success isn't just about money. It's about building something meaningful with your life. I paused, thinking about my grandfather's words. My grandfather used to tell me that I had the heart of a warrior. I thought he was just being supportive, but I realize now that he was preparing me for exactly this moment. He knew that I would have to fight for my independence, and he gave me the tools to do so. After the press conference, I stayed to answer individual questions from reporters and take photos. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, with most outlets focusing on the business success story rather than the family drama. As the crowd began to disperse, I noticed my parents approaching. They looked older than they had on Sunday, as if the stress of the past few days had aged them visibly. "Elena, we need to talk," my father said quietly. "I think we've said everything we need to say, Dad. Please, just give us 5 minutes." I looked at Sarah, who nodded and discreetly stepped away to give us privacy. "Elena, we want you to know that we're proud of what you've accomplished," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "We may not have understood your choices, but we can see now that you were right to follow your own path." "We were wrong to cut you off," my father added. "We thought we were teaching you about responsibility, but we were actually just trying to control you. We're sorry." I studied their faces, looking for signs of genuine remorse or manipulation. What I saw was exhaustion, embarrassment, and something that might have been genuine regret. "I accept your apology," I said finally, "but I need you to understand that our relationship has changed permanently. I'm not the same person who left Charlotte 3 years ago, and I'm not interested in returning to the dynamic we had before." "What does that mean?" my mother asked. "It means that I'll always be your daughter, but I'm also a successful business owner and a military officer. I don't need your approval or your financial support, and I won't accept your attempts to control my decisions." My father nodded slowly. "We understand. We just hope that we can find a way to rebuild our relationship on different terms." "Maybe we can," I said, "but that will take time, and it will require you to respect the choices I've made." We talked for another few minutes, awkwardly but civilly. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a ceasefire. They agreed to stop telling people that my ownership of Coastal Kitchens was a misunderstanding, and I agreed to consider having dinner with them sometime in the future. As they left, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The anger and resentment that had been building for 3 years had finally been released, replaced by something more mature and sustainable. Over the following weeks, the media attention gradually died down, but the impact on the business was dramatic. Coastal Kitchens had become a household name, and our revenue increased by 40% in the month following the press conference. I used the opportunity to implement some changes I'd been considering. We expanded our military discount program, created a scholarship fund for employees' children, and launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. But most importantly, I established a clear division between my military service and my business responsibilities. I would continue serving as an Army officer, visiting the restaurants when my duty schedule allowed, but leaving the day-to-day management to Sarah and her team. 3 months later, I received a letter that changed everything. It was from the Department of the Army, informing me that I had been selected for promotion to major and assignment to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The letter noted that my unique background in both military service and business leadership made me an ideal candidate for a position in the Defense Logistics Agency. I stared at the letter for a long time, trying to process what it meant. This was the kind of assignment that could define my entire military career, the kind of opportunity that came along once in a lifetime. But it would also mean leaving North Carolina, moving farther away from my business, and taking on responsibilities that would make it even more difficult to stay involved in Coastal Kitchens. I called Sarah to discuss the situation. "Elena, this is incredible news. The Pentagon? That's a huge honor." "I know, but I'm worried about the business. I've just gotten comfortable with my role as owner, and now I'm being asked to take on something completely different." "Elena, can I tell you something your grandfather once said to me?" "Of course." "He said that the measure of a true leader isn't how well they manage when they're present, but how well things function when they're not." He built this company to succeed with or without him, and we've built it to succeed with or without you. But what if I'm needed? What if there's a crisis or a major decision that requires my input? Then we'll figure it out together. But, Elena, you can't let this business hold you back from serving your country at the highest level. That's not what your grandfather would have wanted, and it's not what I want either. That evening, I sat in my barracks room, staring at 2 documents on my desk: the promotion letter from the Army and the latest financial report from Coastal Kitchens, showing record profits and continued expansion. 2 different paths, 2 different definitions of success, 2 different ways of serving something larger than myself. I thought about my grandfather's words, "You have the heart of a warrior." He'd been right, but I was just beginning to understand what that meant. Being a warrior wasn't just about serving in the military. It was about having the courage to pursue your calling, whatever form it might take. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah, I've made my decision about the Pentagon assignment." "And?" "I'm going to accept it." "You're right. The business will succeed with or without me, and I need to follow my military career wherever it leads." "I'm proud of you, Elena. Your grandfather would be proud too. But I want to make one thing clear. I'm not abandoning Coastal Kitchens. I'm just trusting you and the team to keep building what we've started. We won't let you down." 6 months later, I was working in the Pentagon, managing logistics operations for military bases around the world. It was challenging, fascinating work that used both my military training and my business experience. But every few weeks, I would drive down to North Carolina to visit the restaurants, meet with the management team, and check on the employees who had become like family to me. The business continued to grow. We opened 15 new locations in my first year at the Pentagon, expanded into 2 new states, and launched our first franchise program. The scholarship fund had provided college assistance to 43 employees' children, and the mentorship program had helped dozens of young entrepreneurs start their own businesses. My parents and I had slowly begun to rebuild our relationship, meeting for dinner every few months and exchanging updates about our lives. It wasn't the close relationship we'd had when I was younger, but it was based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. One evening, as I was reviewing financial reports in my Pentagon office, I received a call from Marcus Chen. "Elena, I have some news that I think you'll find interesting. Your brother Miguel has approached me about a business loan." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of business loan?" "He wants to start a food truck operation. Apparently, he's been inspired by your success and wants to try his hand at the restaurant business." I couldn't help but smile. "What did you tell him?" "I told him he'd need to submit a formal business plan and demonstrate that he has the experience and commitment necessary to succeed. I also told him that family connections wouldn't guarantee approval." "Good. If he's serious about this, he'll need to prove it through his actions, not his name." "Elena, there's something else. Your parents have been asking about making a financial investment in your business. They want to be, quote, part of your success. Single quote, quote." I was quiet for a moment, thinking about the implications. "What do you think?" "I think your grandfather would roll over in his grave if he knew they were trying to buy their way back into your life." "That's what I think too. Tell them I appreciate their interest, but that Coastal Kitchens is my business, not a family project." "Will do." After I hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the lights of Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, I'd been a junior Army officer living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was a Pentagon staff officer and the owner of a restaurant empire worth over $80 million. But more than that, I was exactly who I'd always been meant to be: a soldier who served her country, a business owner who cared about her employees, and a woman who had learned that the only approval she needed was her own. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Elena, just wanted you to know that we broke another sales record this month. The team is doing incredible work, and I think your grandfather would be amazed by what we've built together." I smiled and typed back, "He always knew what we were capable of. We just had to figure it out for ourselves." As I gathered my things to leave the office, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain of being rejected by my parents, the shock of discovering my inheritance, the satisfaction of building something meaningful, and the peace of knowing that I had chosen my own path. My grandfather had been right. I did have the heart of a warrior, and warriors don't just fight battles, they build legacies. The story that began with a phone call from Marcus Chen had become something much larger, a testament to the power of independence, the importance of following your own path, and the truth that success isn't just about money, it's about becoming the person you were meant to be. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well. 5 years later, I was promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to command a logistics battalion at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Coastal Kitchens had grown to 200 locations across 10 states, with plans for national expansion. I never did have that dinner with my parents at their favorite restaurant. But every few months, I would stop by the Charlotte location unannounced, just to sit at table 12 and remember the moment when everything changed. The staff always recognized me now, of course. They would bring me the ribeye, medium rare, and a glass of house Chardonnay, and I would sit there thinking about family, forgiveness, and the price of independence. Sometimes, other customers would approach me, having recognized me from the news coverage years earlier. They would thank me for inspiring them to follow their own dreams, or tell me about their own struggles with family expectations. Those conversations reminded me why the story mattered. It wasn't just about one family's drama or one person's business success. It was about the universal human struggle to define yourself on your own terms, to build something meaningful with your life, and to have the courage to stand up for what you believe in. My grandfather's words had proven prophetic in ways I never could have imagined. I did have the heart of a warrior, and I had used that strength to build not just a business empire, but a life that was truly my own. The trust fund kid had become a warrior, the disappointment had become a success story, and the estranged daughter had become exactly who she was meant to be. And in the end, that was worth more than any inheritance. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.